Good morning, and thank you for having me here. Yes, I'm here on behalf of the International Solid Waste Association. I'm going to focus on what's happening in Europe, and it's going to be with a very broad brush, so please bear with me. But first of all, just a little bit promotion about the International Solid Waste Association. It is a network and an association promoting sustainable waste management and the circular economy globally. To me, it's been the most magnificent network of knowledgeable people around the world. So if you're not our members yet, just sign up, please. Thank you. Right, then it's very hard to discuss policy in Europe without mentioning the elephant in the room at the moment. We are in a different situation than we used to be, and that has reflections everywhere. What the most evident one at this moment from an environmental sector is that there has been slacking on the requirements for sustainability reporting and the Green Deal measures that has been taking place in Europe. They've been pushed forward, so it's been first in 2028 that larger companies have to do this reporting. This is a part of cutting red tape and making Europe a little bit more resilient towards what's happening in the world around us as well. Happily enough, waste management regulation and policy has not been that much affected directly at the moment from what's happening here. But there are implications, and I will get back to them when we hit them in the presentation. So, how is the EU doing? Well, it's quite a nice little graph here. We can see there's a positive development. We have a green in the bottom, that's composting and AD. Light blue is material recycling. Yellow is waste energy. And the black on the top is the landfilling. So, all in all, a nice development, less landfilling over time. There's more recycling and composting coming up. However, the waste generation is not falling. It's slightly up. So there is something to work on the higher levels and the reuse and the prevention parts as well. But it looks nice and neat. But as you're living in a country with different states, I guess you can imagine that it's not that conform over 27 countries in different parts of development, and that's basically right. Apologies for changing the numbers here, but the red ones is the landfilling, yellow is waste energy, and then you have material recycling and composting in the green ones. So basically, at least we have a two-phase European Union. You have northern and western European countries that has basically phased out the landfills. We're talking municipal solid waste here. So that's what I'm going to show, and all I do here is basically municipal solid waste, and that's what I have done for my whole career, so I stick to that. So, yeah, but basically you can see Western Europe, Northern Europe, basically phasing out landfills, while we have Eastern and Southern European countries that still are struggling with a lot of landfilling in their portfolio, and some countries in transition, where maybe if we should put, it doesn't show from this one, but one that sticks out in the middle is actually Italy, that has done a little bit different than both the northern and the southern countries, having more composting and more bio-waste collection than the rest. Still a proportion of landfilling, but midway between the incineration recycling part on the left side and the landfilling, and mostly only landfilling on the right side. And this should be seen in the light of a cap of maximum 10% of landfilling of municipal solid waste by 2035. So there's a long way to go for some of these countries here as well. And there is a new landfill directive coming into place in Europe at the moment. But there is also right now, once again, from geopolitical perspective, a preference not to push the Eastern European countries to have to do too large investments in things that push them further east. So there is a kind of pragmatic idea on how to handle landfilling in Eastern Europe at the moment. First objective is to keep those countries in the European Union. Great. So that shows that, well, of course, 27 countries can't be the same, but this is very evident that there are different parts of Europe that works in different paces. We can also see that there is, how does things look in recycling? This is the European Union Early Warning Report for 2025, so it's not very early any longer, but it gives an idea as well, right? There's basically two targets, 55% prepare for reuse, recycling of all municipal waste, and then there's packaging targets as well. What you can see in the picture here is the countries that are greenish seems to be able to fulfill all the targets, both the targets by 2025. The yellow ones is a risk for at least one of them, and the red ones are not supposed to be able to achieve any of them by 2025. So ambitious targets, implementation in different phases again. Some of the recommendations from the report is go heavily into bio-waste collection. It is a very efficient way to move waste away from landfilling or other residual waste treatment parts. Looking into how to improve prevention, reuse, and recycling in different ways. Financially, by awareness-raising activities and bringing data quality up. So there's a lot of those things as well as asking the member countries to also use mandatory targets for recycling. The targets that I showed you earlier is the European Union target, how you implement them in your country, if you make them mandatory or you work in one way or another on a local level, depends on the country. But mandatory targets also, of course, drives development. So that's where we are standing today. As I said, not that bad. It could be better, and there is definitely places to focus. What's next on the agenda from a European perspective? Once again, more focus on bio-waste. When we're talking about bio-waste in Europe, it's usually we don't have a combined garden and food waste collection. We have a food waste collection and a garden collection, where food waste goes to either composting or anaerobic digestion. Garden goes to composting or in some extents to waste to energy as well, depending on how woody the material is and how the market looks for it. So it's been pushed. Textiles recycling is politically hot at the moment. There is an EPR scheme to be established for textiles. And there is a mandatory collection scheme for textiles being rolled out. The problem is there is no market for recycled textiles. So we have to find out how to do that. There's a lot of textiles being collected at the moment. Most of it is going to waste tins. Not all, most of it, but a large part can't be set off as for reuse and can't be set off as recycled materials at the moment. So that's a problem. Packaging and packaging waste. There is a new packaging and packaging waste regulation coming into force. It came into force in February this year that says ambitious targets for collection, for EPR systems on packaging, but it's also one of the first regulations where we actually see more demands on the production side. There are demands on recyclability of products that will go up in 2035, 38 to saying, well, you can't put something on the market that is not 95% recyclable. And there are going to be pushed targets for recycled content in packaging as well. Looking at, I think on some products up to 65% recycled content in plastics in order to be able to put them on the market. And on top of that, there's a general waste prevention target introduced there as well. as well as some more specifics on, for example, how much empty space are you allowed to have in the plastic package for being able to put it in the market. So it's one of the first regulations that pushes back on production more on the production side as well, and quite interesting that it's going to happen. It's a very ambitious regulation, and we'll have to find out how it's going to work in the real world as well. Yes, critical raw materials, once again, has always been interesting, but it's more interesting when in a world where you stand more alone. There's a lot of e-waste and a lot of e-waste collected. We could do more of that, of course. Once again, markets is tricky. Basically, all the capacity to handle critical raw materials is placed in China today. So there's not really, even if you have a lot of materials you can use or upgrade in Europe, you don't have a capacity and knowledge to do it. And in China, you can actually mine the metals more cheaply than buying recycled material, e-waste from Europe. So once again, a little bit like textiles, but on another part. So it's once again the markets and the system to absorb materials is not really mature everywhere as well. And the European Union is always working on end-of-waste criteria, finding out when is waste not waste longer, so you can use it in materials. And that's going to be a new push for that, and that's very long and interesting processes, and we'll see what that leads to. And then, of course, there is a focus, there's a push for prevention, but as you see, nothing much happens, and I think that's the problem with prevention at the moment. Great. Okay. I was also asked to say a little bit about waste to energy, because people ask me why are you able to implement waste energy solutions in Europe or in Northern and Western Europe? And there are different things here, but I think one thing that we also discussed in the International Solid Waste Association, when it comes to the debate on waste to energy, I think it's very important to say, well, we need to adhere to a waste hierarchy, saying, well, waste to energy is should not be a conflict between the higher levels of a waste hierarchy and waste to energy. Waste to energy discussion is basically a discussion on how do you want to treat your residual waste. So it's landfill, dump sites, or waste to energy, and what fits your situation the most. And also saying, remembering that first and foremost, waste to energy is a waste treatment technology. It's something we build because we have a waste management problem. It's not built primarily for energy production. Energy production is a secondary benefit of those plants, and of course, an integrated part of a business model, but it's not energy producing facilities. First and foremost, it's about waste. And I'm also pointing out everywhere that waste to energy isn't open burning. Because in the debate, everything that's said to be burned is put in the same crate at the moment. There is a huge difference between having very regulated and controlled processes and burning something openly or in the trash can in your yard. And that's kind of a divisions you need to do, and then you can have a little bit more of a more balanced debate on the topics. But so that's I think that's a point we'll make here. We also say, well, this is in general what you need to be able to introduce any technology and push any kind of agenda, right? You need involved and engaged politicians bringing the topics forward. You need to have a systemic approach around what kind of solutions you work with together. And when it comes to waste to energy, it's also the relationship to the energy system, of course. You need proven technologies, you need trust in the public institutions and operators, and you need a transparency and openness for people to be able to see what's happening out there. And we just have to conclude that some of us like to adhere to common facts, and some of us base our decisions on feelings, and that's a fact. that the situation is that. So you have to be able to have a debate that caters for both tribes, so to speak. Great. Circular economy. Yes, it's urgent. We need to prevent waste. We need to have more reuse. there is a lot of talk going on, but very little is happening. And if we're going to pull this off, it calls for government. This is a political issue, because this is a transformation of our societies and our economic systems. It has to start from the top with a political engagement, and then, of course, it can boil down to all kinds of corporations. But such a shift is a political task to put forward, and a hard one, because it's something that we haven't done in a long time, and we're very used of economic systems we're working to today. But basically, if something is going to happen, and it has to, we need to have a political push to do so. Last slide. Once again, how does things work in Europe? Yes, we have ambitious regulations, but we can also see that there are some of the implementation of those regulations that aren't that smooth. I think the trust in public authorities and operators is quite good, but of course there's a difference between different countries. Markets for materials, as I said, textiles, plastics, rare earth materials, we don't really have those markets. There's good markets for the old school recyclables, as well as for compost and fertilizers at the moment. Fertilizer, by the way, because fertilizers we used to come from Russia. So now there's a new demand for AD-produced fertilizers in the European market as well. Sound financial setup, I think. Of course, we have a good cost coverage model and willingness to pay in Europe in general. There are things like, well, back to batteries. You can't insure your recycling plants for batteries today. So who wants to take that kind of risk in the system, so to speak? And fit technologies, overall in a good place. But once again, when we look at some of the recycling of the harder materials, there are things that needs to be done. If we're going to do very ambitious plastic recycling targets, we need improved technologies, and we lack good logistical technologies and approaches for reuse and reuse schemes as well. So thank you very much.
We have one slider. Björn, what role can European companies play in providing... I can do that. What role can European companies play in providing new technology and skills to assist Australia in meeting its targets?
Yeah, well, we can, first of all, of course, we can tell what's happening in Europe and what has made things feasible on the European agenda. I think there's a lot of things that can be brought into Australia as well, because, most of the things that are tried in Europe technology-wise should be adaptable in an Australian context. But it's about getting the financial, societal, political system to be there to make it work in real life. How do you build your business cases? How do you make it happen? Is due to the parameters and the environment you guys know. So the meeting of your in-house understanding of what's going on in the States and in Australia, and the adaptation and use of technologies and different kind of regulations on the European market. I think that's where you can do it. It's for dialogue and understanding the conditions you're going to implement something in.
All right. Thank you, Björn.